Welcome to the UK's first metal detection podcast. It's All Metal Mode UK with your host from across the pond, Mr. Michael Hare. Nocta Macro Detectors is the fastest growing manufacturer in the industry, and for good reason. Many detectorists, including Mike Hare, call us the most innovative, but we are so much more than that. We listen to and care about our customers. We also offer a wide range of detectors to fit all of your needs. Come check out all of our products today at www.noctadetectors.com. Detectors for everyone, everywhere. A lifetime.
Hello everybody, this is Mike Hare and you're listening to the All Metal Mode UK podcast. And unfortunately tonight Dave could not make it. He is tied up and he will be back next week though, so looking forward to that. I apologize for last week's absence. Steph had to work. I was with the kids. It came up that night. It was mandatory. She had to be there. I apologize, everybody, and I apologize for not giving out a quicker notice. But hopefully we won't have any more issues. Hopefully we'll be all good. You can follow us on Facebook at All Metal Mode Podcast UK, Metal Detecting UK Dirt Fishing, Archaeology and Metal Detecting Magazine, Archaeology and Metal Detecting Group. There you go. If you're tuning in and want to jump into chat, once you start the show, you'll see a chat bubble on where you see your pause and play button and all that. There should be a little chat bubble, looks like a little cloud. You can click on that. Come join us in the chat. We're always taking questions and everything. And join us in chat if you can. Next week we're gonna have Mike Smith with the Chariot. There's some new updates and stuff, so we're really looking forward to that. That ought to be really interesting. If you remember right, Mike found the Chariot. I believe this past fall. We're going to have air metal detectors on. They are in production. We're going to get an update on them and talk with them the following week. Then, 3 weeks out, we're going to have Addicted to Bleeps back on. Always like talking to that guy. What a great guy to talk to. Divi Detectorist the following week, and then we're going to have an LP show, and we're going to meet the team. So that's 5 weeks out. So there you go. We got some great people lined up over the next 5 weeks. Tonight, however, we're kind of changing it up. You know, we're pretty hardcore metal detecting, I think. We do go off a little bit, but I think this is going to be a really cool show. I think if you're a detectorist, you like adventure, you like exploring and treasure and stuff, and I think fossils are very, very much closely related. I mean, who doesn't want to find a fossil, right? And I know in southern Ohio, I found some really cool stuff, fossils while walking the creeks and all that. My brother lives real close to Caesar's Creek. There's a big place there you can dig, and it's very cool. So, yeah, absolutely. So tonight we're going to talk to Steve from the Dinosaur Museum. And hey, Steve, how's it going?
Yeah, pretty good. How are you?
Good. I am doing great. Luke in chat said, I'd love to know how to fossil hunt, right? Yeah, I think they're very closely related. Who doesn't want to find a fossil when they're out metal detecting or searching a creek or something? Yeah, everybody in the chat saying they'd like to go do some fossil hunting. I agree. So, Steve, tell us a bit about yourself. What's the story with you and fossils? How'd you get started?
Well, I guess with fossils, with the geological record in whole, luck, chance, serendipity is so important. And when I was at school, in those days, and this is a long time ago, in those days, you had to do Latin, and I didn't get on very well with Latin. It didn't really agree with me at the time, although I came to love it later on. But the only alternative at school from doing Latin was to do geology. So I defected to geology as soon as I possibly could. And the first thing that my geology teacher did was he brought me down to Lyme Regis on the south coast of England. And he took me out on the beach, and I found this fossil, and it was just lying there. It was about 3 inches across. It was preserved in fool's gold. And it was an ammonite, a coiled mollusk shell. So there it was, and this golden ammonite just lying on the beach. And I found out it was about 200 million years old, and I just thought this was the most amazing thing, and a life-changing moment. And I knew from then on, that paleontology, fossil hunting, fossil collecting was the way to go. And that was the start of it all, a long time ago.
That is very interesting. So, just before the show, you were telling me where you really got started at. Can you tell us more about that?
So, what you did at school is, I did as much science as I possibly could, and then you go on to college and you do a first degree in geology, which I did, and then you go on, if it's fossils you're interested in, you go and do a second degree in paleontology, and that's when you get to choose. You can pursue an academic career in paleontology, or you can pursue an industrial career in paleontology. And for me, I probably wasn't going to get on too well academically. So I chose to do a master's degree in micropaleontology, which gave me entry into industry. And I worked in industry as a paleontologist. And the whole point of that, of course, was the fossils, of course, are really interesting and useful. But coming out of college, poor as a church mouse, I wanted to earn a living, and I wanted travel, and I wanted adventure and excitement. And fossils in the oil industry gave me that. And fresh out of college, my first job, I got shipped out to San Francisco. That's where I was based, but I was working on the North Slope of Alaska, exploring for and helping to produce the giant oil fields that have been discovered up there. And that was the start, if you like, of excitement and adventure in industry. And I had a wonderful time doing it.
That is very neat. And now, you'd mentioned you spent some time in San Francisco as well. Did you do any fossil hunting there?
Not particularly. I mean, there's a little bit of fossil hunting that you can do around about Point Reyes, just north of San Francisco. But a lot of the rocks there are fairly young, and they've got a volcanic influence to them. So that's maybe not quite so good for so good for the fossils. But I have to admit, I was also very much sidetracked by American life, and in particular American football, which really grabbed my attention, and a lifelong love. So second after fossils, but the Raiders are where it's at. Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool. Really cool. Yeah, because football is very different over there. I don't talk football much. So
No.
And we sure don't have anybody from the UK show that would want to talk American football, so very cool.
It's really popular over here.
Yeah, right.
But anyway, sorry.
I think the football you guys have over there is way more popular than our Americanized version, but I don't know. I prefer it. I think I don't know. Anyhow, we're not here to talk about football. We'll move on.
Let's get
So
on to the real thing.
you and I can talk about it off air sometime. I'll talk football with you. So tell us about the museum, Dinosaur Land Museum.
So Dinosaur Land Fossil Museum. It's it's my fossil collection, based in Lyme Regis on the south coast of England. And it's when I worked in industry, it was working with microscopic fossils. You need to use microscopic fossils because of the nature of the material you get to work with in your industry. So the tiniest of fossils, the ones I worked with in particular, were something called the agglutinating foraminifera, which I guess you'll never have heard of. No one ever has. But maybe 10 of these things would sit on top of a pinhead.
Goodness.
They're the most beautiful things you'll ever see, but they're tiny. You can't see them with the naked eye. Yeah. So when I eventually quit industry and moved back to Lyme Regis and started thinking about what on earth I could do to earn a living, the building that my museum's housed in came on the market, but I kind of decided that although these agglutinating foraminifera are the true love, that I maybe wasn't going to do terribly well if I had a museum of exhibits where you couldn't actually see the exhibits. They're so small. So it was a case very much of getting the building and getting it sorted out and then starting to collect big fossils that you could see. So the museum started out with, 113 specimens. So, I admit it wasn't the greatest museum in the world, but each day add new fossils to the collection, new bits of text, and now it's currently up to nearly 14,000 specimens on permanent display, and that number is important to me because I like to call it a traditional museum because it's the specimens that are important, and you can go there and you can see lots and lots and lots of fossils all side by side. And if you want, you can read the text that I've written about them. You can look at them for the sheer beauty, but you can look at them and muse over the significance of them. Right. And there's no, and never will be, any fancy lighting, any glorious display cabinets, no buttons to press, no computers. It's the specimens that are the important thing. So a traditional museum.
That's brilliant.
And it's important to me that it's important, and it's not for everyone. Some people, would not like my museum, but if you want to see fossils, and if you want to see lots of them, and if you want to talk about what they mean, then it's a good museum for you. So if you like fossils, come and visit me. If you don't, go somewhere.
Well, you say it's not for everybody, but I really don't know anybody who wouldn't enjoy that. And I'm sure you've never had a kid come in that museum and not just love it. I think fossils, you don't have to have a love for fossils or, a passion to enjoy looking at them and studying them. And I don't know. I think it's really cool.
I think you can look at these things in lots of different ways. So that, for example, I've got one big fossil. It's about, 5 foot high. It's a crinoid, a sea lily. It looks a bit like a plant, but it's preserved in it's preserved in iron pyrite fool's gold, so it shines like gold, and it's set in a black background. and it's just the most beautiful thing you'll ever see. It is absolutely gorgeous. You can look at this thing and you can drool over it for the science if you want, but you can look at it just for the sheer beauty of it. And to me, those things are important. The science is important, and I enjoy the science tremendously. But just looking at these things, they're just so beautiful. That's good. And one of my neighbours, he's an artist, and he thinks that all scientists ought to be shot at dawn. But he thinks that this crinoid, this golden plant-like thing, is the most beautiful thing, and he covets it terribly, and every so often he comes over and has a look at it and lusts over it, and that's great, isn't it? That the scientists can look at it, but the artists can look at it, and everybody can enjoy it. And the fossils are like that. You can look at them in lots of different ways. The science, what they tell you about the individual creature and about the history of the earth, where they come from and how they evolved is important. But hey, just stand back and look at these things. They are beautiful, and enjoy them for nature, the wonderful beauty of them.
Steve, I want to say I'm on your website right now, and wow, how incredible. If anybody wants to see, he's got some wonderful pictures. I'm just getting started here, but it's dinosaurland.co.uk.
Yeah, that's
beautiful website as well. You got a really nice website, and wow, you've got some really cool stuff on there.
Yeah, they're just so beautiful. They're just so beautiful.
Absolutely. So yeah, and we'll give it out again at the end of the show. If anybody can, if you can plug it into chat so everybody's got a link, I'd appreciate if somebody could do that. So, a question I have, I hope it's okay to ask, do you have a few favorites, or, I always ask this question to somebody that detects, tell me a couple of your favorites. They don't have to be the most expensive or the most, what we find. The reason I love asking that question is sometimes it's the story about how it was found rather than the find. I'll never forget when I first got started doing this, there was a guy that has just this enormous collection of some of the most incredible stuff. I mean, this guy has cannonballs from the Revolutionary War and the Civil War and all these incredible things, and one of his favorite things was a pipe tamper is how it's called. And and I thought, well, how funny is that? But then when he told the story of how he found it and stuff, it was so interesting. But I mean, is there something that you found that just really sticks out, that has a great story to it, or extra special close to your heart?
That story drove me actually. The stock answer, what my favourite fossil in the museum is like I've got 3 children, and it's like asking me which is my favourite child, because they're all, equally good or difficult depending on how you want to view it. Right. But the story is something that is important, and with all of the fossils in there, I've got these things on display, but what I try and do is to write some text about something that makes them memorable, the story behind them. The fossils are good, but when you put the story to it, it makes them even better. And I've got one fossil in there. It's only small. It's about 3 inches across, something like that. And I found it. Oh gosh, this would be about 4 years ago now, when I was doing some mapping, by collecting fossils, and joining up the dots. It's same fossil, same thing, and producing a geological map based on the fossil of an area near me. And usually, I drive along to this area that I was mapping, and one day, rather grandly, I decided I was going to walk the 2 miles there, and of course didn't check the weather forecast. So I got absolutely soaked walking along to get to my mapping site, and I was really cheesed off with this because I was so wet and I was so cold. And I got there and I wasn't very happy at all. But I thought, I'll pick up one fossil just for the sake of it, and then I'll go home. So I picked one fossil up. I didn't look at it. I picked it up. It was covered in mud. I stuck it in my pocket, and I walked all the way back home again, and I was really cheesed off. And eventually, after I got myself warm and a nice cup of tea, and I looked at this fossil and I cleaned it. And it was an ammonite, one of these coiled mollusk shells. But there was something unusual about this one. And what had happened was that this ammonite had been bitten by a plesiosaur, Loch Ness Monster type thing, one of the giant marine reptiles that swam along the same sea. And you knew it had been bitten because the plesiosaur had left behind one of its teeth wedged into the shell with cracks radiating around it. So, this is just a wonderful fossil, and this chance of, just randomly picking up something when I wasn't very happy about things, and you suddenly get this most magnificent thing. And the fossil itself is wonderful, but it's led on to all sorts of other little spin-offs as well. So that, this idea of these shells being bitten by the reptiles, and the traditional academic view is that these bites take out nice chunks of the shell. So you get a nice bite-sized chunk taken out of this ammonite shell. And I've always been deeply suspicious about this. And how on earth do you get a nice chunk taken out of a brittle, rigid shell? And it was finding this tooth wedged in that prompted me into having a look and doing some research on the things. And what I did was, with my wife's help, we got some nautilus shells, which are similar to the ammonites. It's the only living relative that you've got available. And I got an old bear trap that I just happened to have on display in the museum. And what we did was we fed these nautilus shells into the bear trap to see if we could replicate any sort of biting that takes place, and nice chunks taken out of the ammonites. And of course, no matter what we did, you couldn't get a nice bite-sized chunk ripped out. What you did was you got cracks, just like the ones that we'd seen in that fossil with the plesiosaur tooth locked in it. So, this random find almost turned out to be incredibly exciting, incredibly interesting, and led to a whole series of research activities that I've written up for the museum.
That's so cool.
Important. And we had great fun, feeding these ammonite shells into the bear trap. Because, of course, we fed the first one in, and it shattered, of course. So then we thought, perhaps we ought to have some ammonite flesh in here. What does ammonite flesh? What is it? How do we replicate it? So we experimented with all sorts of bits of meat and gel and such like. And no matter what we did, we could never get a chunk taken out of it. It was always a shattering. And the wonderful thing is, I got my long-suffering wife to do this feeding in of these shells into the bear trap. Something not to be done lightly. So dressed up in all sorts of protective clothing. And I stood at a safe distance while she did this, filming it, all in the interest of science. Yeah, great fun.
I got to question your husbanding here. I don't know.
You're not the only one.
I'll tell you what, your wife's a lot braver than mine, because mine wouldn't go for that at all. Not at all. Now, is your wife interested in I would guess she'd have to be. You're obviously so passionate about it, it spills over, I'm sure.
Well, I think if you talk to her, she'd say that she was long suffering, and it's. But you see, again, that's a really interesting and complementary side of the museum, because I take her out in the winter on nice romantic days out on the mud flow in the middle of Forcetown Gales in the pouring rain. And the brilliant thing about it is that we go out there and I find what I'm expecting to find. Sort of trained and I know what I'm supposed to find. So that's what I find. My eyes are so blinkered. But when she goes out, she finds what she sees because she's not trained in what she's supposed to see. So, we go out and we come back with totally different collections of fossils. And that's really, and some of the things that she's found through this unblinkered approach to fossil hunting, have been quite dramatic and, very different, a totally new direction for collecting for the museum. It's really important, really interesting.
I hope this is okay to ask. How much of the museum, how much of the collection is your finds? Do you have anything that anybody else has found that's been added in, or is it?
Yeah, so most of the things in there are things that that we found. The collecting is important, and the local collection. But one of the advantages of working in industry before I set the museum up was all overseas. You see, so I've got a network of friends around the world that look out for special things for me. So I do have some exotic things from different parts of the world. Through those sorts of sources. For example, I've got a 73 kilogram lump of dinosaur dung, which I have to admit I didn't find. But I got that through a friend in Utah, and that's where it comes from. And this 73 kilogram lump of dinosaur dung is one of the great attractions at the museum and gets photographed with people just about more than anyone else. So, that's great fun.
That's odd, but cool. So, in where and I've got another question, I guess, before I get into that I'm real curious about. Have you done much outside of the UK? I know Alaska back in the 70s and stuff, but have you traveled much of the world looking for fossils, or do you is it mostly from the UK?
No, nowadays it's pretty much in the UK. I tend not to travel that much. But before I set the museum up, working in industry, I spent a lot of time in China, just as China was opening up, and I spent a lot of time in the northern parts of the North Sea and around Britain, and lots of asides through in Oman and Egypt, and I spent quite a lot of time in offshore Newfoundland, Iceberg Alley, which was a bit unnerving. But yeah, everywhere it's travel, and that was important as a young man to travel and get this adventure and see these different places, and great excitement. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's interesting. I'm sorry. I keep looking. I need to close out your website so I'm not just staring, and I got to focus here since I'm by myself tonight hosting. You obviously have a passion for it. You've pretty much dedicated your life to it, right?
Yeah, I think so. It's from a very young boy collecting, but all of my working life I've worked with fossils. But I tell you, the more that you work the subject, you never come close to seeing it all or understanding everything. And what happens is, you look at one thing and it just leads you on in two new directions, and the whole thing just spirals out of control. And if there was an overriding impression I have of the subject, is that I know nothing. The more you work it, the more knowledge you accumulate, the more you appreciate that you're not even scratching the surface. The subject is so big and so interesting, and it's like when I worked in industry. The group I was particularly interested in were a group called the agglutinating foraminifera. And these are microscopic little blobs of jelly that stomp around on the sea bottom. They pick up grains of sand and they build a shell. And these things are just so insignificant, it's not true. But they were awfully useful for the sorts of things I was wanting to do in industry. And I worked with these things and pretty much every day, and usually half the night as well, for 13 years. And at the end of that 13 years, all of that work, in theory, I knew so much about these things. But I sat down and thought about it, and I thought, I haven't got a clue what's going on with these things. I just haven't got a clue. So you spend all of that time and effort working on these things, working on such an insignificant twig on the tree of life, and you know nothing. It's just such a big, awe-inspiring subject. It's wonderful. Yeah, wonderful.
Right. That is really cool that, like you saying, you're spending your life and you've only scratched the surface. How cool is that?
Yeah,
There's so much to be learned. You did you were talking about, I forget what they were called now, with the bear trap and all that. And what's some, and that definitely led you to some hypothesis. And what's some other things that you've done and learned through your collecting, is there any other experiments involved or great knowledge gained?
I mean, the wonderful thing about having my own museum, and it's independent, and not a penny of public money is spent on it, or ever will be, which means I can do exactly what I want in there, and I don't have to go in any focused direction or whatever. So whenever something takes my interest, I can pursue it. So like with these, feeding the nautilus into the bear trap. Another one that I've got and still doing quite a lot of work on is that, sometimes you get these ammonites, these coiled mollusk shells, and sometimes they've got an iridescence to them. Like most modern mollusks have an inner lining of mother of pearl, this shimmering stuff, abalone shells, that sort of thing, this wonderful rainbow iridescence. And at first, I was looking at this iridescence that is seeing on these ammonite shells, and you only got it seemingly in a few very select locations, and it's always been explained as during the fossilization process, the original mother of pearl gets destroyed, and then a secondary iridescence gets created during the fossilization process under pressure, and that's just fine. It's a good explanation if you're looking at a very unique, an unusual occurrence of this iridescence. But one day when I was working, I was cleaning a fossil, and all of a sudden you looked at it and there was this flash of iridescence that came out of it. And it really startled me. It was such a shock because it wasn't one of these few that are known to have iridescence. So it started me looking at other ammonites from different ages, from different locations, from different species, and the more I looked, the more I was finding this iridescence. Sometimes you have to look really hard, but it was often there. So you've got this problem now that you've got lots of these ammonites showing this iridescence, and are you really going to invoke the case that what you're looking at is the destruction of the original mother of pearl and then the recrystallization to produce a secondary iridescence? Surely the simplest answer is that you're looking at the original mother of pearl. And I've built up quite a big collection now of ammonites with this iridescence from different species, different locations, different time periods, and building up the argument. But then to counteract that, I did find an academic physicist who'd been doing some some work on mother of pearl iridescence. So I sent her some of my samples to have a look at, and I said that I thought, maybe we were looking at the original mother of pearl, not a secondary iridescence. And I got a very curt response back saying rubbish. So maybe it's not working out, but you've still got to answer why you get this iridescence in lots of different places. So it's an ongoing thing, and it's like that. I can work on whatever I want and whatever interests me. It's brilliant,
right? And you can do and say whatever you want, and you can be controversial.
Yeah, as controversial as I like, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm not always going to be right,
right?
But at least it might provoke. It might provoke things that haven't been done in the conventional academic manner, so that like this biting of ammonites and feeding them into the bear trap and getting a shattering rather than a nice bite mark taken out of them. The academic approach is still very much that these missing chunks of ammonites that you get every so often are actually bite marks, even though I've not been able to reproduce that biting. I get shattering with my experiments. So, it's work in progress.
Right, absolutely. So, yeah, that's really cool. So, before we move on, I'm really curious. So, do you think that bite mark was like 1 in a million, or was it a fluke? And that usually doesn't happen. Do you have an idea of what that is?
Well, I think there are examples of biting that you can see. Sometimes I've got some big chunks of reptile bone in the museum, and some of these bones have got nice conical depressions in them, and if you match them up with teeth from bigger reptiles, it seems to fit. And I think that's I'm reasonably convinced that that's a biting as well. So this plesiosaur tooth lodged in the side of the arm is not unique. It's just unusual. So very special. Yeah.
Very cool. So if you live in England, the UK, and you want to get into fossil hunting, where do you go? How do you get started?
Oh gosh, there are so many beaches around Britain, and beaches are good because you get the natural erosion that takes place, bringing fossils out of the cliffs, as opposed to if you go inland, you don't tend to get as much natural erosion. So you have to go to quarries and you have to work really hard to dig these things out. Whereas on the beach, the sea's done it for you. And in Britain, of course, we're really lucky that there is such variety of rock exposed, different ages, different environments around the coast, so that you don't have to travel very far to go and find a different body of rock that's producing fossils, and lots of variety. So it's easy in Britain to go to the beach and to collect fossils, and Lyme Regis, of course, is that's where I'm based, and that's really good for Jurassic fossils, early Jurassic fossils, about 200 million years old. Wow. Early Jurassic marine fossils, creatures that lived in an ocean. I don't know what. 200 meters of water depth, something like that, but a lovely subtropical sea that supported lots of variety of marine life. But like if you go from Lyme Regis, 50 miles to the east, then you can get to the coast of the Isle of Wight, where you get much younger rocks, 100 million year old rocks, deposited in a land environment. So you get the dinosaurs there, the strictly speaking land dinosaurs. Wherever you go in in Britain, it's possible to get rocks of slightly different ages, deposited in slightly different conditions, with slightly different fossils that you can go and collect there. So it's relatively easy to to find great variety quite easily here.
I'm sorry, we're getting some questions and I'm having trouble keeping up with them, being that I'm by myself tonight. So if you don't mind, let's take some quick questions. Let's get caught up, and then I'll ask everybody hold questions till the end. Since I'm by myself tonight, it's hard for me to keep up. But here's some questions. Thankfully, Luke is helping me. He's messaging me some questions that I actually missed. Is there a certain type of ground condition that fossils are more prevalent and retain their impression?
Fossils are very strongly skewed to old marine environments, so creatures that lived in the sea. Simply as a preservation method. If you go onto the land and you see a dead animal, it's not going to last very long. So the chances of it fossilizing on land is very remote, whereas in the sea you get a supply of mud comes in which protects the dead creatures, and they stand a chance of being preserved as a fossil. So the fossil record is very much a record of creatures that lived in the sea. So that's important.
Okay. Makes sense. So it's harder inland to find the fossils. Now, what about creeks and rivers and stuff? I would think that they would be pretty good. Are they not?
Well, rivers. It depends on the energy levels in them. So if you're getting a fast-flowing river, one with lots of turbulence, then you put a dead body in that, and it's going to get churned up and it's going to get broken apart, and whatever creatures are in the river, by and large, going to get rid of it. By contrast, if you got a nice, say you went to the Gulf of Mexico, and you have a creature that dies and it sinks to the bottom and it gets covered by all that mud being brought in on the Mississippi Delta. So it rapidly gets buried under mud and protected. So you get a much better chance there of it being preserved as a fossil. And it's not always that. The Wyoming dinosaur fields, dinosaurs, land creatures, and vast numbers of them, so that they got protected well there. But by and large, it's a marine environment is much better for the chance of preserving fossils. Yeah.
Okay, I gotcha. I understand. Well, I was asking because, like I was telling you, I'd found trilobites and stuff in the creek. So,
but you see, they were coming out of the creek. But the rocks that were being eroded that had the trilobites in would have been deposited in a moderately deep sea with lots of mud in it, back in geological time. And then the creek is nowadays coming along and eroding those rocks and bringing fossils to the surface.
Okay.
So you've got to build up a picture of the environment that was taking place at the time the rocks were deposited, rather than what's happening to them at the moment. So, like in Lyme Regis, the rocks in Lyme Regis were deposited about 200 million years ago in a sea that was, it was about 200 meters deep. It was about 100 miles offshore, and a constant rain of mud coming in from the big river systems flowing in from, because Britain was still connected to the Americas at that time. So you had these big Mississippi-like rivers flowing out, bringing lots of mud in. So that's the story you can build up of what was happening then. But if you come to Lyme nowadays, it's right on the sea edge, and you get these big cliffs of rock, the land cliff, with deer rampaging across the top of it, and big chunks of it collapsing down. So conditions were good then,
Right.
not so good now. Yeah.
I gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. And now that you say that, if I remember right, millions of years ago, Ohio was part of the ocean, if I'm not mistaken.
Sure. Yeah.
And that would make sense. It was even though it's not now. That's why we find so many fossils in southern Ohio. Gotcha.
Very much. Very
Okay.
much so. Yeah.
And another question the next one I want to ask, so I can kind of clear it and move down the chat. Scotty B asked, is there any close beaches to Newcastle? He's not even concerned about what kind. It's for his son would love to find fossils.
Gosh, now I have to admit that I'm not that familiar with the area around Newcastle, but I'm sure there will be. So you don't have to go much further south. Well, not that much further south from Newcastle to get to the North Yorkshire Scarborough Whitby, which I know is prolifically fossiliferous and very good. But of course, he can always go to to his local museum, and I'm sure they'd be able to tell him some good beaches to be able to take his child along and experience the joy of fossil hunting.
Yeah, absolutely. This come from Stephen. Do you find opal in fossils?
You do. So opal sometimes replaces the material that the fossil was originally made of. So that Australia in particular has fossil wood replaced in opal. So you get this opalized wood. And it's really hard, and it tends not to have that much colour, the fiery colour that the opals have, but it does have some colour. And you also get there seashells, oysters that have been replaced with opal, and they tend to be a nice vivid blue colour. So you get these opal seashells, incredibly attractive. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Very cool. Another question we have here. This one's from Pete Terrell. We kind of answered some of it, but is there any tools you need, and what are the rules in England?
So, the most important tool is your eye, and like on the beaches around Lyme Regis, a lot of the work in getting the fossils out of the cliff has been done naturally, so that you get these mud flows, mud glacier-like structures flowing down off the cliffs, bringing material down onto the beach, and those mud flows get washed by the tide, which washes away all the mud, and the fossils just drop out into the gravel around the edge of these mud flows. And to find the fossils, all you need to do is to walk along there and look, and you don't need to hack anything open. You don't need to do any digging or anything. Just look, and you can pick these fossils up. It's just magical. Civilized fossil hunting. It's just magical. Other places, like I was talking a few minutes ago about beaches in Yorkshire and Scarborough and Whitby, and there it's a case very much of you need to find it's a ball of rock called a nodule, and these balls of rock often have fossils inside, and to find them, what you've got to do is use a geological hammer, and you use that to whack the nodule. You introduce a shock, and so long as there's a weakness between the rock and the fossil, then that nodule will split open perfectly cleanly and expose the fossil that's lying inside. So the most important tool is your eyes. The second most important tool is your geological hammer.
Interesting. Doesn't take much, does it?
It doesn't. Sometimes you find that, sometimes you can go out on the beach and you can find a fossil and it looks absolutely perfect, and you don't need to do anything to it. Sometimes it's relatively easy to find the fossils, but then you have to put an enormous amount of work into cleaning the fossil up, taking the rock off around it and presenting it so that it looks the way people expect the fossils to look at. And so you get this wide range of effort involved, from you walk along a beach, pick something up and it's perfect, to you walk along the beach, pick this great lump of rock up and spend 6 months cleaning it up to make it presentable for the museum. And everything in between is possible. But it is possible very easily to start this out, just going out on the beach and looking and picking these beautiful things up. It's so accessible for people if you want to do it, and you can be so successful really easily.
That is interesting. So cool. Here's another one. I don't know if this is a question or more of a statement. Elliot Allen said, I'm certain that the breakages you refer to as bites are along the prevalent suture lines found in ammonite species.
No, sometimes you get these sort of half moon shapes cut out of ammonites in where the body cavity used to be, so where the fleshy part of things were. And so you get these nice, and it's not on the sutures. It's in the body cavity. The problem is that if you agree with me that these are not bite marks, the fact is that you still get these half moon chunks taken out of the body cavity of these things. If it's not bite marks, what is it? So that's the next line of research, to try and understand what's causing these things. It's not bite marks, it's not on the sutures, but exactly what it is. We can have theories. There are some ideas, but we don't know at the moment. So
that's interesting. Very cool. Another question, and I think we're all caught up. Well, I don't recall ever having a guest and getting this many questions. And I've already had a couple messages. We are less than an hour in the show, and I've had a couple of requests to have you back on again already. Yeah. So things are going really good. Has anyone found, and I apologize for this, it's kind of funny, but I'm going to read it just like it came in. Has anyone found a decent dinosaur fossil in the UK, like a proper big Godzilla-style dino? Yeah,
yeah, definitely. So that, baryonyx, which is a substantial, 9 meter long giant fish-eating dinosaur, was discovered just southwest of London, and the Isle of Wight is famous for its dinosaur remains, and lots of them, and even I was telling you earlier about how my wife comes out with me, Jenny, and she likes to collect as well. She doesn't have much choice, actually, but
I suspect if she wants to spend time with you, she's got to go walk the fields or the beaches.
One of the things that she found, women, I'm sure you know, are incredibly competitive, and they always want to do better than the men. But
Steve, my wife might be listening, so I'm going to disagree with you right now.
Okay, so obviously it doesn't apply to you. But she found in a place, not far from Lyme Regis, but in an open marine, rocks deposited in an open marine environment, she found what subsequently seems to be a large chunk of the leg of one of the giant armored dinosaurs. And this is it's okay getting dinosaurs if you go to the Isle of Wight or if you go to Wyoming. But on the south coast of England, there are less than a handful of dinosaur discoveries that have been made, and one of them was found by her. And
oh wow!
Yeah. So, do you think I've heard the last of it?
No, never, never. Oh, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
I took. We've got kids and we've got a baby that keeps us, Steph, from not doing much metal detecting with me. And we went back to Ohio to visit family this past fall. And I wanted to take Steph out for like some real deal, her and I, no kids, metal detecting. And there's three of us guys, and Steph tags along. She doesn't have, between the three of us, we probably have 50 years of experience. She's probably, been out a total of 20 hours, and she's just finding stuff left and right. Yeah. And I'll tell you, when she decided to go home and give my mom a break and help with the kids, and we were all three so relieved that she wanted to, okay, baby, yeah. There was no pressure for her to stay at that point. Like, go ahead, leave, please. Yeah. So, no, I get that. And I still hear it now and then. Remember when we were in Ohio? And yeah, I hear you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah. I understand.
Yeah, it's how that goes. So that's awesome. She does do it with you, though, even if she doesn't quite have the passion that you do. I suspect there's probably not a lot of people that have the passion like you do, though. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, it works. It works well. It's and like I say, complementing each other so that. Although in theory it's my collection in the museum, her contribution is at least as important as mine. And when discussing how to present something or the layout or whichever, sometimes I'll make a suggestion, and she'll come up with something totally different, which turns out to be much more practical and realistic. So it's a good. It's a good relationship. It works well. Yeah,
that is great. Now,
she doesn't hear me saying it.
Have you two ever gone out and she's clearly beat you on fines for the day, but since you're the expert, you try to play down hers and make yours sound like they're more important? Or does she know too much now? You've taught her too much.
It usually works the other way around. Yeah, that my ones get belittled and. It is something that constantly trying to. So there was one day when we were out on a beach. Again, not that far away from Lyme Regis, and she was looking around. And she came up, waving this bone at me. So hey, look what I found. And I was looking at this bone and thinking, well, look, that doesn't seem right, does it? And it was, we took it back to the museum, and in the museum, I've got a human skeleton, and it was quite obvious, taking Jenny's bone and holding it up by the side of the human skeleton, that what she'd actually found was the left thigh bone of a human.
Oh no!
Oh no! Yeah, and guess who it was who had to. Walk up to the local police station to say, "Look what I found."
Right.
So it's she usually manages to outdo me. So I just accept it nowadays.
What came about with that bone? Was it modern?
So the bone. Eventually they worked out that it had come from a decaying graveyard up in the cliffs way up, and it was Victorian, so 150, 100 years old. So, but every time the policeman sees me nowadays, he still looks suspicious at me. So,
oh, that's funny. One thing, I think I asked a question, but maybe I didn't, and I didn't hear you answer it. I'm sorry if you did. I might have been looking at my messages to make sure I wasn't missing a question. What are the laws regarding fossil hunting in England?
So, pretty much the same as I guess with metal detecting. If you're on land, you need the permission of the landowner to go looking. It's slightly different when you're on the beach because, so long as there are no specific regulations or scientific preservation orders, if it's lying loose on the beach, then you can go along and you can collect it, and it's legally yours. In practice, it tends to work. It tends to work pretty well. But getting the permission of the landowner is the important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's brilliant. So really, it's okay. You can collect on the beach, and as long as you have permission on landowners, you're okay.
Yeah, and so long as there's no local restrictions. So
Okay.
There's a beach. Not that far away from me, where there's a local restriction on carrying a geological hammer and collecting from that beach. So you can go and look, but you can't touch, sort of thing. But they're few and far between, and I think certainly in the UK, there's a great tradition of the academic paleontologists, have done a lot of the pioneering work here. But amateurs, in inverted commas, the people that are just doing it for fun, for a hobby, go out and they make important collections which are, scientifically important. And the great majority of people, when they find things, it's not something they just want to sort of hide away. They want to talk about it and show it to the academics and get information on it and share the knowledge, if you like. There's a great tradition in this country of competent amateurs going out and doing great work, and that's important. It's important that people should be able to go out and collect freely, and So
okay, that's very interesting. So the question came up, and I'm going to ask it. We kind of touched on it a little bit. I don't know that you said if you had to pick one of your favorite fossils in your museum, what would it be?
Gosh, I don't know. It's
I think that's such a, although I'm not a huge, although I've done it, but like that'd be like asking me what's my favorite metal detecting find.
Yeah.
I don't think I could answer it, but
sure. They're all interesting, aren't they? And and I think with the fossils, they're all individual, and there's something unique you can talk about for each one of them. So. They're all great, but the ammonite with the tooth in it is great. I've got something in the museum. It's I call it the diving ichthyosaur, and the ichthyosaurs, they're marine reptiles. They look a bit like dolphins, and by and large, the ones in Lyme Regis are about 6 feet long, something like that. But I've got one in the museum that I call the diving ichthyosaur. And what I think happened with this thing was that it was swimming along in the sea when it died, and it nosedived down, and it rammed itself into the sediment at the bottom, and it all crumpled up on the top. So you got this pile of rock with the bones in it, and as far as I can tell, it's all the bones of an ichthyosaur. And the beak of this thing, they had this great big beak, a rostrum with lots of teeth in it. And I cleaned this fossil up from the underneath so that you could see this rostrum and how it had been distorted, broken by the impact, and how it had pushed. The sediment that it rammed into was bowed down. So you can see this thing, and it's just the most fantastic thing, and I mean it's unique. And whether or not it really was diving down and ramming stuff into the sediment, I don't know. But I can't think of a better interpretation of what I'm seeing in the fossil. So I'm quite attached to that one as well. Yeah.
That is very cool. Very cool. So before we go, and what we'll do is we'll open it up if there's more questions. There's been so many questions. I think we probably got them, but we'll make sure before we go if there's any more questions. Well, tell us about the museum, the entry fees. Do you have any events? Do you have any events coming up? If you do,
no events. It's always open. And I mean, each day pretty much I'll add something new to the collection, so they're constantly growing. It's open. I mean, this time of year it's open every day from 10 until 5. I charge £5 for adults. I charge £4 for children to go in there. Gosh, I'm usually there. It's one of the things that
£5. That's less than a cup of coffee anymore. That's affordable.
Well, yeah, but on the other hand, I'm acutely aware of the fact that it's. I mean, for some people, it's it's quite a lot of money to come along and see a fossil collection. And one of the things that we don't do is we don't employ anyone. We made a decision right from the start that if people are going to come along and they're going to pay a lot of money to come along and see our fossil collection, then if they want to talk about things, they ought to get either me or my wife in there. So it's either me or my wife at the moment that mans the desk and takes the money and points you in the right direction and talks to you. When it gets busy in the middle of summer, we'll both be in there all the time. But it's just a very personal museum, and if you want to see millions of fossils, that's great. If you want computer animations, or if you want flashy display cases or bright lighting, or these dinosaurs that roar at you and that sort of thing, then you're maybe going to be disappointed if you come along and see me. But I hope people will enjoy it. I certainly do.
I can tell you from the pictures I've seen, it looks absolutely fascinating. We have a lot of local museums here in the United States, small, local. And you walk in and it's dingy, small. A lot of times they're in old houses. And don't get me wrong, I'm there to look at the artifacts or whatever this particular museum is about. But yours looks absolutely incredible. Stunning pictures that I've seen. And even, like when you click on the museum and, like the balcony, it looks like there's a balcony, or is that just... I mean, your museum looks absolutely stunning to me.
The museum's housed in an old church, an old congregational church. So there's a delicious irony there, isn't there, with the traditional conflict between science and religion.
Right.
But the church, it's just over 250 years old now, and it's the only Grade 1 listed building in Lyme Regis, and it's the church where the pioneering fossil hunter Mary Anning, you've maybe heard of her. She sells seashells on the seashore. Is all about Mary Anning. So she was baptized in the building when it was a church, and she worshipped there pretty much all of her life. But you get this great big space inside with a balcony running around the side of it, and the space is just great for lots of cabinets of fossils, and the balcony just great for dinosaur models and text and that you can walk along. And then there's also associated with it, there's the old schoolroom, which I've converted to house modern shells and skeletons and bones, so that you can compare what you see in the fossil record with what you see in present day life. Well, at least that's my excuse anyway. It's a good excuse.
Yeah, I like that. I seen some of that on your website, and that looks like a very interesting display too. I hope, I kind of, my goal is in the next few years I want to come over and metal detect, and I would love to come visit your museum and shake your hand and meet you. But yeah, I am fascinated with your website. It has some, not only is it a great website, but the pictures and stuff of the museum itself is absolutely fantastic. So wonderful job, Steve. So let's see if we have any more questions. Oh, do events. Do you ever do any events? Do you ever do any speaking or anything like that? Do you educational events or anything like that?
No, not really. It's, I mean, like I say, I'm usually at the museum, and I'm very happy to talk with people as long as they want, and talk about whatever they're interested in. I used to, give formal talks, and I mean, very occasionally I'll go and do that now. But by and large, I mean, all of the things that I talk about are housed in the museum, and it's just a lot easier, to show people and talk about things in the museum rather than go out and give formal talks to people. So no, that's I don't.
Incredible. I think it's. I get a kick out of that. Not only are you living your dream, I'm guessing you're living your dream. I would, you got a fascination for it, and you don't do any events or you don't do any seminars or anything for money to bring in, but yet it's £5 to get in. I mean, that's. To me, that's almost ridiculous. £5 is nothing to get the time. And not only do they get to walk around the museum, but you saying, I'm there, you can talk to me, you can ask me questions. So I think that is just absolutely brilliant.
Good.
Absolutely brilliant. So before we wrap it up, we'll give it a few minutes. Does anybody have any more questions for him? Steve, I think what we'll have to do is just get you back on. I've been looking forward to this show. Luke reached out to you. Luke is behind the scenes and helps us so much. And I didn't know how... Yeah, he's a great guy. I didn't know how the show would be taken because I'll be honest with you. Here in the United States on the Metal Detecting Podcast, we'll do some different subjects related to, treasure hunting and exploring in general. And they go over real well, but they don't seem, the shows that we do that are off topic that aren't strictly metal detecting don't seem to do as great. But that's okay. It's all right. And I was looking forward to it. I know Luke's tuned in tonight, and that doesn't matter. But what I'm getting at, we've had a great response and a lot of questions, and that tells me that people have really enjoyed it. So, thank you so much for coming on. And, here's a question just came up. What's the rarest fossil to date? I'm guessing he's asking, what's the rarest fossil you've found?
Gosh, the thing about fossils, they're all individual, and they're all unique. So, they're all just special. There is no sort of standard fossil, if you like. But when you get things like this tooth lodged in the side of an ammonite, there's only a handful of records of that sort of thing that are in the academic record, published record. The diving ichthyosaur, as far as I can tell, there's nothing like that that's ever been found. My wife's dinosaur bone, Jenny's bones, there are, I don't know, maybe 5-6 similar discoveries that have been made in the last 200 years.
Wow.
They're all individual and they're all unique, and they've all got a majesty to them that makes them just fantastic. Yeah, great. I tell you, the really wonderful thing about the fossil hunting is the element of luck, chance, serendipity, and I guess that's something that you can share with metal detecting. That with fossil hunting, you can go and you can look for the right sort of things in the right sort of place at the right sort of time, and you probably do pretty well. But ultimately, to find something totally out of the ordinary, it's just luck. It's chance, and that's great. It means that my chances of finding something truly spectacular are just as good as my wife Jenny's, just as good as a little kiddie that comes out onto the beach. Luck is important. Yeah.
That is neat. Luke is still messaging me, and he said I should have just called him, man. I think Luke is really excited about this show. He's never messaging me this much, but he said he wanted you to know the Archaeology and Metal Detecting magazine will be doing a lot to share your museum in the coming weeks. That's awesome, Luke. Thank you.
No, thank you. That's brilliant. Any help is gratefully received. Thank you.
Good. And he said, have you ever fancied metal detecting?
Yes, it's one of these things, that one of these things I'll get around. Sometimes I'm driving around and you see people, and there are some people that metal detect on the beaches around about Lyme Regis, and you talk to them and think one of these days I'm going to do that. So one of these days I will. I don't know when, but
get a hold of Luke. Luke would hook you up. Luke would hook you up. Absolutely.
Tell him I want to find a chariot.
Right. We're going to have him, Mike, on next week talking about that chariot again. We had him on months ago. Very interesting. How cool would that be?
Oh, it's such a fabulous discovery, isn't it?
Right.
Just unbelievable, isn't it? Fantastic.
Yeah. Now I'm getting more. Yeah. That's amazing. I'm trying to make sure we got everything wrapped up. Is there any more questions before we go, guys? Is there anything else? And again, Steve, if you'll do it again, we would love to have you back on. I have really enjoyed it. I mean, although I can't say I've been I don't have, my main passion is metal detecting, but, treasure hunting comes in so many different forms. And, whether somebody out there listening is interested in doing fossils, it's right there. It's in the same, it's in that same category. It's treasure hunting. That fossils are absolutely treasures. Oh, great point. Scotty B says, where's the museum at?
So it's in Lyme Regis, Dorset on the south coast of England. It's hidden away a little bit. It's it's on the back street in the old town of Lyme, the old part of Lyme Regis. But the address and there's a little map I think on the website dinosaurland.co.uk, or you can come into Lyme and hopefully you'll be able to find it. Dinosaurland Fossil Museum. Yeah.
Okay, good deal. And again, one last time, I'm gonna give it out. It's dinosaurland.co.uk. I'm gonna post it. I'm sorry, it took me a second because I pulled up another screen to paste the link in the chat that's going on. And so there you go. It's in the chat again. Check them out. Go visit. And that's absolutely great.
Well, fantastic. Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you for coming on. It's been fantastic. And keep in touch with me or Luke or both of us. And especially, if there's something you want to come on the show and discuss, or you found something new or a new breakthrough, let us know. We'd love to get you back on. Or just update us on the collection and what you've been up to and what you found. Or Don't take this personal, but what your wife has found that's better than yours. Update us on that.
Well, that'll please her no end. Well done.
Steve, again, thank you so much. It's been a wonderful show and having you on, and we really appreciate it. Keep in touch.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Wow, that was a lot of fun. That was even more fun than I thought. And I'm interested in fossils. I've found some, but what a great guy to have on. And that was just wonderful. On Facebook, North of the Tyne Detecting. Check them out. Addicted to Bleeps. Metal Detecting UK Dirt Fishing. C-Scope 6MXI UK. I like that group. I'm a fan of that metal detector. All Metal Mode Podcast UK. On YouTube, you got Huntress Kimmy and Clodhopper Scott. Love watching those guys. Addicted to Bleeps. I like all these. Shilling King Metal Detecting UK. TC Detects. He's using a Rudis. Love watching him. Grim Bleepers and Aaron South Coast. I always say Aaron's name. Why do I always say Aaron as I'm saying it? It's Aaron, but it's the YouTube channel is South Coast Detecting. And don't forget, if you're looking for a new metal detector, any equipment, check out Leisure Promotions, WLP Metal Detecting, Leisure Promotions, www.leisure-promotions.co.uk. Check them out. Thank you all for tuning in, and have a good night.
The Archaeology and Metal Detecting magazine acts as a hub for information, offering articles from archaeologists, detectorists and other specialists throughout the genre, featuring many links, event info and news articles associated to archaeology and metal detecting. We also offer professional review services and promotion for books, resources, videos, documentaries, gadgets, equipment and much, much more. The magazine is run by the archaeological and metal detecting community for the archaeological and metal detecting community. So come visit us at archmdmag.com, that's archmdmag.com, and check out information from our media section with all the latest content, news from the Archaeology channel, podcast and the YouTube channels that feature the now legendary Digger Dawn, the Man with the Hat and Archeo Duck, just to name a few. If you would like to offer an article, link or inquire about other services, then pay us a visit at archmdmag.com and drop us a line.